Welcome back to the Panic Room, everyone, and to a very special video today. Now guys, I know that a lot of you are not into poetry, and I totally respect that. I understand that completely. Looking at you, Ollie. I was with you for a long time. You know, I respected poetry for what it was, however, I just didn't see it as something for me. You know, I'd always kind of been drawn, as many of you are, to the darker side of literature, to the darker side of the written word, as they say, and, you know, I didn't see a lot that poetry offered me outside of, like, Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft, whom I've always liked. Until David Wiley did his March of the Poems, and it kind of inspired me to, you know, dive a little bit deeper. Is there something out there for the horror fan in poetry? And I was pleasantly surprised. Yes, there is. There is even horror poetry out there for my extreme horror lovers. We're going to be talking about one of those today. So I thought we could go through some of my favorite poetry books, because I do have my series Panic Poetry, but I don't go into the books themselves really on that series. So I wanted to really highlight some of the texts that I've been using on Panic Poetry, you know, in case any of you are interested. Maybe you want to dive a little deeper, maybe you are kind of curious to see what all is out there as far as dark and horror poetry is concerned, but you don't really know where to start. Maybe this will help you out. So let's get into it. So let's start with one of the first books that I picked up. Now obviously, you know, I just said I wanted to try and step outside of Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, all of that. However, when I saw the cover of this book and the title alone, I had to get it for this series, and it was Dark Poetry, Horror Poems from the Masters of Horror. Yes, Edgar Allan Poe is featured in here, as is H.P. Lovecraft, but a lot of their works I had never heard of. This isn't your, like, standard fare, you know, if you're thinking like The Raven or anything like that. No, this goes a little bit beyond that. And there are authors in here that I had never heard of, such as, let's see, Algernon Charles Swinburne, Walter de la Mare, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and a number of others. So if you like the classics, but you might be looking for just a horror poetry book, this might fit the bill. Now the next one that I came upon when I was looking for horror poetry was The Muse of Love and Pain by A.X. Salvo. And again, just that cover. I thought that was very minimal but very impactful. So this is actually interesting because this entire collection is by one author. This isn't a compilation of authors. And I thought this was neat because I really did want a horror poetry book that had to deal with some of the major themes in poetry and in horror. And so when I saw Love and Pain, I was like, that has a lot of potential, you know, because horror tends to warp both of those things. It kind of reverses those, and I wanted to see just how a poem would do that. And I have been very pleasantly surprised by what I've read in this collection. I think that A.X. Salvo has a very interesting voice in poetry. So if you're looking for a collection that's all from one poet, this one might be pretty good. It's very digestible as poems go. So, The Muse of Love and Pain. All right, now the next one I think is for my, I guess, more experienced poetry lovers. This book was sent to me originally by the author, and I do have a review for it. In that review video, I actually focus more on the author's, like, short stories, but she does have a number of poems that I have been reading on Panic Poetry, and that is The Antithologium by K.A. Schultz. So you get a little bit of both worlds in here. Now, I will say that K.A. Schultz's writing is incredibly unique. I said in the video about her short stories that her writing makes you want to slow down, okay? This is not something that you sit and read front to back and you're done with it. And her poems are much the same way. Her poems are something that you really have to contemplate. Now, if you're just getting into poetry, maybe you want to start with something a little bit more simpler, because to me, the Antithologium really takes it there for poetry. You know, it really, you know, pushes that symbolism and how you can see a piece of yourself in the poem, which I feel like is what a lot of people who come to poetry are looking for. They're looking to project a little bit of themselves or their experiences into the poem. And I really think that K.A. Schultz understands that. However, it might not be the cup of tea for someone just getting into poetry, but I have to say it is some of the most unique and some of the most beautiful. So, The Antithologium by K.A. Schultz. Alright, so the next one is quite possibly one of my most favorite collections that I have came upon. And I found her via Instagram, the author, S.E. Martins, and her book, Skull Moss. I mean, just take in that cover. Guys, is this not beautiful? That is breathtaking to me. That is art, to me anyway. There is something about this collection that really, really resonates with me. I don't know what it is. I really don't. It's so hard for me to articulate how beautiful these are. And I really think that if you are a lover of words, especially if you are darker inclined the way I am when it comes to your literature, you're going to like this. You know, there's just something about it. She has completely captured the very essence of what I mean when I say dark poetry. Is it blood, guts, and gore? No. It's something about the way she presents the darkness to you. It's beautiful. And I think I'm talking to a bunch of people who already see the beauty in some of that darkness. So if you want to put a voice to it, maybe pick this up. Skull Moss by S.C. Martin. All right, so the next one I'm so happy I picked up. This is actually by one of our own. Jeremy Fee. He is a booktuber, and this is his book, Eclectic Nightmares, and it's called spoken word poetry. And that is so perfect for my Panic Poetry series, you know? It is supposed to be spoken, and that is what I do in Panic Poetry. I read the poem. And, you know, this actually resonated with me on a lot of levels, because yes, it is some dark poetry, there's some horror poetry in here. However, there's also some poetry that resonates with me as far as my job is concerned, so I love this for a lot of reasons. However, I think that the way Jeremy writes is very approachable. And, you know, even if you're not like super into poetry, I feel like you can digest what he writes. You know, it's approachable poetry, you know, and I think spoken word poetry kind of should give that feel to the people who pick it up and want to read it, because, you know, it's meant to, I guess, be like for every person. Not that all poetry can't be for every person, but, you know, I feel like poetry can be very scary, you know, to people. They think, oh, I'm not smart enough to comprehend what they're saying or the symbology or whatever. I don't get that from Jeremy. To me, this is easy to comprehend. I feel like his meanings behind even some of the more symbolic poems in here are very clear. And like I said, very digestible to the reader. So, our very own Jeremy Fee. Of course, I will have his channel linked down below. Now the next one is probably the newest collection to me, and that is the 2017 Riseling anthology. And this is actually science fiction, fantasy, and horror poetry. And I came across this when David Wiley was talking about these collections. You know, they come out with them, I guess, every year. This just happens to be the copy I picked up because it was super cheap. And I have not been disappointed. It is actually rather thick, and I feel like there's something in here for every fan. If, you know, you're a science fiction person, a horror person, I think you're going to find something in here that suits you. And also, I think that if you are a fan of those genres, it's going to be a little bit easier for you to comprehend. You know, like I said, I feel like poetry can be really scary sometimes because people think they're not going to understand it. And if that's the case, and you're a science fiction fan or a horror fan, maybe this one's for you. You know, like this is tailored to your genre. And, you know, I really like that. I really like that you get like a smattering of different genres, but in a poetic form. I think it's pretty interesting in that regard. So, the Riseling anthology. Okay guys, so we're down to the last one. And I saved this one for last because it is probably the weirdest of my poetry books. And this is my extreme horror poetry book. Now you might be asking yourself, what the hell does that mean? Well, if you break that down, you know what extreme horror is, right? The blood, the guts, the gore, they go there. That gross horror, right? Not everyone's cup of tea, but, you know, I do like a smattering of it myself. Yes, there are poems about it. And they are in putrescent poems. Yes, those are, like, I think forks? I'm pretty sure they're forks in his eyes. So if that gives you any indication, this book goes there. This book requires trigger warnings. This is your blood, your guts, your gore, and everything in between. There are no guardrails in this book. There are things that I can't read on Panic Poetry in this book because I would be afraid that YouTube would flag the video. If that doesn't intrigue you, I don't know what will. So if you're one of those people who loves your extreme horror and you don't think that poetry could be for you, I challenge you to pick this up because you will be surprised. I guarantee it. So putrescent poems. So guys, that is it. I hope you enjoyed that. I've been wanting to sit down and do this video for a while. I know it's not gonna ring everyone's bell because not everybody likes poetry, but you know, I really hope that if you have stuck with me, that you see that, you know, this is just another part of my love for the dark parts of literature. Really, I just kind of wanted to shine a light, I guess, on some of these because I do think that, you know, there are people who don't dive into poetry for whatever reason, and specifically my horror people, you know, maybe you're not, you know, keen on like the pretty flowers and the fluffy cloud type poetry. And yes, there are poems out there for us, everyone. There are bloody, gory, terrible, dark poems out there. Yes! So guys, comment down below. Tell me, did any of these, you know, strike your fancy? Do you think any of these are for you? Do you like poetry? Do you hate poetry? Let me know down below in the comments. And guys, thank you for hanging out for another video here in the Panic Room. Please like and subscribe. It would really help me out. And until next time, bye for now.
Mm-hmm.